Hey guys, coming at you live from my closet again. Yesterday's chaos with my kids running in and out was a little much for me. So right now I'm going to go over the passage from Silent Spring. This is actually the very first chapter of that book that you were assigned in Actively Learn. And so I'm just going to read it out loud and then also talk about some of the questions as we go. So it says, background information. So I gave you guys a video on this. Pesticides are chemical compounds designed to destroy crop-eating insects. Pesticides can be deadly to many species, including humans, in addition to the insects and other pests that are intended to kill. In 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, which revealed to the public the dangers of DDT, a pesticide in wide use at the time. The awareness raised by Silent Spring eventually led the United States to ban DDT entirely in 1972. So this excerpt comes from the opening pages of the book. How funny, I just said that. It was the first one. Okay. So, there was once a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony with its surroundings. The town lay in the midst of a checkerboard of prosperous farms with fields of grain and hillsides of orchards where in spring white clouds of bloom drifted above the green fields. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across a backdrop of pines. The foxes barked in the hills, and the deer silently crossed the fields, half hidden in the mist of the fall mornings. Wow. Okay, so this paragraph has a lot of what we would call imagery. Okay, if you notice here, we've got white clouds of bloom, like from plants, green fields. So the author here is using this imagery to show life in this town. And the fact that it lives in harmony with its surroundings means it's not like a big city where animals like have lost their habitat. It shows that there's still lots of nature in this city because we have the names of trees, we have these colors. Down here, the author mentions some animals and the sounds and the sights that you might see during this time. So, Rachel Carson has painted us a picture of a successful small town that is in sync, I guess, with nature, okay, friendly to nature. Along the roads, laurel, viburnum, and alder, great ferns and wildflowers delighted the traveler's eye through much of the year. Even in winter, the roadsides were places of beauty where countless birds came to feed on the berries and the seed heads of the dried weeds rising above the snow. The countryside was, in fact, famous for the abundance and variety of its bird life. And when the flood of migrants was pouring through in spring and fall, people traveled from great distances to observe them. I want to point out the migrants here are talking about birds that migrate north to south. Okay, so it says, annotate in paragraph 2 the details the author uses to describe the rich environment of the town. So the details they use words such as delighted. Okay, that has a very positive connotation. I'm going to go back to paragraph 1. Prosperous means successful, also a positive connotation. Connotation is how somebody feels about a word. Let's see. They're talking about it being places of beauty. Here, the author is talking about the different plants and flowers that you're going to see, an abundance and variety of life. People travel from great distances. They fished in the streams. The streams were clear and cold. So there's a lot of different vivid language and descriptions that the author uses here. So why would they use such descriptive details to describe the town? I think the author really wants you to understand how this town was successful and how in harmony the town is with nature and the environment that it has. So what can you conclude from these details? Exactly what I just said. Okay. So what does the phrase heart of America suggest in paragraph 1? So the heart of America, if you were literally to put a heart in our country, that's going to be the Midwest, Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana, Illinois, Kansas, Nebraska. That part of America is known for having like really good values. Think, you may be familiar with Laura Ingalls Wilder, like Little House on the Prairie. It's known for being wholesome. It's kind of the America that everybody can relate to. Not a lot of crime or anything like that. Why does Carson use this phrase in the first paragraph? I think she's just adding on to that wholesome image of this town. Like, it's a town where everything's very Leave It to Beaver. If you don't know Leave It to Beaver, pause this video and Google it real quick because you should know that. Okay, and we already talked about the annotations when we went through. It says, reread paragraphs 1 and 2. What is the author telling the reader about the town she's describing? I feel like I already explained what she's describing. So your job on this question would have been to say, she's describing a successful town that is in harmony with nature. And you can cite text evidence such as the trees had a blaze of color in the fall, or the fact that foxes and deer are still around shows it's still a nice place for them to live. Or you can talk about the different plants on the side of the road, or how the streams are still clear, how people come from all around to see the birds. Like, all of those would be great text evidence to support that the author is trying to paint this picture perfect town with her descriptions. All right, let's go to the next page when it decides to load. Ooh, make sure you know all of these vocab words on the side because you know that those show up in your exams. Okay, anyway, the water flowed from the hills and contained shady pools where trout lay. Ooh, see, they're already telling you that trout lay their eggs there, meaning it's clean, it's not polluted, it's a good place. So it had been from the days many years ago when the first settlers raised their houses, sank their wells, and built their farms. So again, the author is kind of painting this pioneer picture of this untouched, kind of like virgin landscape where humans haven't had a big impact. So then a strange blight crept over the area and everything began to change. Some evil spell had settled on the community. Mysterious maladies swept the flocks of chickens. The cattle and sheep sickened and died. Everywhere was a shadow of death. The farmers spoke of much illness among their families. In the town, the doctors had become more and more puzzled by new kinds of sickness appearing among their patients. There had been several sudden and unexplained deaths, not only among adults, but even among children, who would be stricken suddenly while at play and die within a few hours. Wow. Okay. There was a strange stillness. The birds, for example, where had they gone? Many people spoke of them, puzzled and disturbed. The feeding stations in the backyards were deserted. The few birds seen anywhere were moribund. They trembled violently and could not fly. It was a spring without voices. On the mornings that had once throbbed with a dawn chorus of robins, catbirds, doves, jays, wrens, and scores of other bird voices, there was now no sound. Only silence lay over the fields and woods and marsh. On the farms, the hens brooded, but no chicks hatched. Yeah. The farmers complained that they were unable to raise any pigs. The litters were small, and the young survived only a few days. The apple trees were coming into bloom, but no bees droned among the blossoms. So there was no pollination, and there would be no fruit. The roadsides, once so attractive, were now lined with browned and withered vegetation as though swept by fire. These too were silent, deserted by all living things. Even the streams were now lifeless. Anglers no longer visited them, for all the fish had died. In the gutters, under the eaves... Wait, I'm going to pause. So, in these next 3 paragraphs, like, the author is painting a pretty grim picture. We know that it's sad by some of the word choice that she chooses. For example, she describes it as an evil spell or a mysterious malady. Remember, a malady is like a sickness. The cattle and sheep sickened and died. Ooh, going crazy with that. Okay. Everywhere was a shadow of death. Okay. So all of these word choices create this sense of like doom with the reader. You know, you have sickness, death, evil spell, mysterious malady. Okay. The doctors are puzzled, meaning they're really confused because there's all these new sicknesses appearing among the patients. They're dying suddenly and unexplained. And it's not just adults dying, but it's kids too. So if you notice, there's a lot of death in that paragraph. And here, again, you're showing the absence of life. The stillness means there's no movement because there's no life. The birds are gone. The feeding stations, like the bird feeders, are deserted, meaning there's no birds visiting them. The birds that there are, they tremble violently, like they're shaking and they can't fly. It's a spring without voices. Imagine in the spring in Arkansas, like we always hear voices. We hear the songs of birds, but this is eerily quiet because the birds are gone. Okay. Here, hens don't lay eggs. Like the chicks don't hatch. And when the pigs have babies, when they have young, they're not living. So the author has painted here this complete, everything's dying. And nobody knows why. So let's look at this next paragraph. Actually, the next one. Okay. In the gutters, under the eaves, and between the shingles of the roofs, a white granular powder still showed a few patches. Some weeks before, it had fallen like snow upon the roofs and the lawns, the fields and streams. Okay, so whatever this white powder is, it's everywhere. Okay. No witchcraft, no enemy action had silenced the rebirth of new life in the stricken world. The people had done it themselves. So in this case, the author is saying the reason that there's no life is because of the people. So it's the people that are responsible for that white powder. This town does not actually exist, but it might easily have 1,000 counterparts in America or elsewhere in the world. I know of no community that has experienced all the misfortunes I describe. Yet, every one of these disasters has actually happened somewhere, and many real communities have already suffered a large number of them. A grim specter, a specter's like a ghost, guys. A grim specter has crept upon us almost unnoticed, and this imagined tragedy may easily become a stark reality we all shall know. So, in this final paragraph, the author is explaining that the town doesn't exist, but all of the things that she described have happened in one place or another. So maybe one place has had an absence of birds. Another place has had pigs that fail to have young that live very long. And maybe in another place, people are dying of a mysterious illness that's puzzled doctors. So all of these things are true. They just didn't all happen to the same town in America. They're happening all over America due to this white granular powder that she's saying is everywhere, on the houses, on the grass, and the fields and the streams. Remember, the fields is like where we would get our food. So, in this case, I want to point out the reason the author is telling us this is it's kind of a warning sign. Think about if you've ever watched or read A Christmas Carol, where you have the Ghost of Christmas Future and they show Scrooge his miserable future if he continues in his ways. So Rachel Carson wrote this as a warning that humanity needs to change its ways, or else this imagined tragedy, in the last line, may easily become a stark reality. So a surprising reality that all of us will have to face if we do that. So I'm going to put it in the Edpuzzle. What is the white granular powder? And why would you call it a fable for tomorrow? So if you're not familiar with what a fable is a story that teaches a lesson. Like the rabbit and the hare teaches you, like, even if you think you're going to win, you need to keep trying hard. Don't slack off because somebody else will come and pass you up. So in this case, I think the title, A Fable for Tomorrow, is hoping to teach humanity and readers a lesson about what it will be like if we continue in our ways so that we can make a change.